Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the reported plans of Boris Johnson's rebels to further weaken him as they wait for another opportunity to push for another confidence vote. Their first skirmish is reported to be over the Northern Ireland Protocol legislation. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So first things first. What are the rebels ultimately building up to? They know Johnson is spectacularly unlikely to voluntarily resign, so they have to force him out. That means a confidence vote, either in Parliament, which is not at all optimal for them, or an internal party one. But the internal party one is technically blocked for a year now, isn't it? Well, yes and no. The party rules are effectively made by the 1922 committee of Tory MPs. It's not like Labour's rules, where parts of the wider party also get a say. Tory MPs, the Tory MPs in the 1922 committee, could vote to change the rules anytime they like. And it has been noted that the members of that committee are not real fans of Boris Johnson. Now, the elections for that committee are coming up quite soon. It may well be that Tory MPs vote for people who would be much more likely to be Johnson's allies. Or they may decide that the current committee are doing a good job and they'll just keep with them. In which case, if that committee suddenly decided that there was a compelling chance that Johnson would be voted out again, they will change those rules, no problem. I wouldn't expect anything before, say, October, but, you know. I mean, Theresa May, remember, stood down half a year after her confidence vote win. She wasn't protected by this 12-month thing because she was told that those MPs were prepared to change the rules and oust her. But for those who insist that Tory MPs could just change the rules as soon as there's enough of them to bring him down, I would point out a couple of things that are different with Boris Johnson. The first is to note how uncoordinated the rebellion was against Johnson for this week's vote. They should have put their letters in at the end of the month, after the by-elections. That's their best chance. But they weren't working together. This is because Boris Johnson, despite his affable public persona, is a ruthless bully. He has crushed any hints of dissent to the point where most of his detractors dare not say so. So to change the confidence vote rules would require those members of the 1922 committee knowing that there's a majority now ready to get rid of him. Not necessarily easy for them to be able to gauge that, I would say. So unless I'm missing something, that would require a lot of Tory MPs sticking their head above the parapet who have not yet done so. The second thing is that Boris Johnson has a lot of ministers, way more than is usual for a government. Ministers get paid their MP salary, of course, because they're MPs, plus an extra ministerial stipend on top. How much depends on their seniority, obviously. Now, because Johnson has way more ministers than he should, he's giving more of his MPs higher wages, and they know it. The good ones will know that they would still be ministers under a new leader, so in a secret ballot, they'll still be voting against him, potentially. But many of them know that their salary goes down if Johnson goes. I mean, Johnson, I think, has got 170 on the so-called payroll, the ministerial payroll. You only need about 100. So the next leader, I'm not saying they would definitely axe 70 of them, but they may well axe quite a lot of them. So in other words, Johnson is bribing his MPs with our money to back him. That being said, MPs are not going to prioritise extra money as a minister over retaining their seat on the gravy train after the next election. So Johnson will still fall, but rebels know they need to push him. And I saw a report that some rebels are planning vote strikes. They say they will begin with the legislation designed to break our international Brexit treaty and dismantle the protocol. Now that all the nonsense with the confidence vote is over, we'll be talking about that a few more times in the next week, I feel. And it's an interesting play, this one. Not necessarily to Johnson's disadvantage, but I'll get onto that in a moment. The idea seems to be that rebel MPs will simply withdraw their support from contentious bills. Contentious within their party, that is. They're all contentious for someone like me. They're calling it a vote strike. Yeah, that's right. Tory MPs are talking about strike action. Will wonders never cease? This would be an abstention rather than voting against, which means that Johnson could still win these bills because to suffer a defeat, it would take a lot of Tory abstentions. Like, Tories voting against his bill's different because each Tory then counts as two against him. But an abstention means you need a lot of them. to lead to defeat. Because bear in mind, on this particular bill as well, the DUP will vote for it. So he's straight away got himself an extra few MPs there. I mean, bear in mind that the 148 Tory MPs who voted against Johnson in the confidence vote are not suddenly going to start abstaining in parliamentary votes. A lot of them voted against him secretly. So, some of them will have been in cabinet, I reckon. And some of them might agree with the government motion. So even the ones who are willing to publicly oppose him, they're not going to abstain on every single bill, because there'll be some bills there they support. And others, as I say, only want to oppose Johnson in secret. And parliamentary votes are not anonymous, so they can't oppose him in secret with votes in Parliament. So this is likely to limit the impact of these vote strikes. But the idea would be to keep the pressure on Johnson, let him know that he can't take votes for granted. In related news, I saw a suggestion that Johnson might withdraw the whip from any Tory MP who votes against his Northern Ireland Protocol bill, which I think will be coming before Parliament next week now. I think they were going to try it for this week, but they didn't do it in time. Now, if he did withdraw the whip, it wouldn't derail the planned vote strikes, because those will be abstentions, not votes against. So they presumably wouldn't have the whip withdrawn. It's only ones voting against it. But it suggests a clear sign that Johnson really does want this bill to pass. Now, I'll be honest, I thought he'd welcome the chance to have it kicked into the long grass if he could blame it on others. That he might be willing to go all out to get it to pass suggests he's getting ready to press the self-destruct button. But if Johnson thinks he's only a short time to reassert his authority, it does make some sense. Because although the EU seem prepared to dissolve the entire trade and cooperation agreement if we dismantle the protocol, it's not going to happen quickly. It's not an immediate reaction. We're not going to have a trade war this year, for example. From what the EU are saying, the likely sequence of events is as follows. First, to wag a disapproving finger. Maybe restart the legal action, which is no threat to Johnson at all. Bear in mind that the bill doesn't do anything in itself. Even if it's passed, it doesn't do anything in itself. It's only if ministers use the powers it grants to remove significant parts of the protocol that the EU need do anything at all. It could be months before anything even happens. Second stage is targeted tariffs on British imports. They won't go straight for dissolving the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, be targeted tariffs. And I would say this is the real start of the inevitable trade war, although I'm not sure we should call it a trade war, because a trade war has two sides. We wouldn't retaliate, because we can't. Not only can we not afford to make EU imports even more expensive than they already are in a cost of living crisis, massive inflation, no growth, but we don't have the border controls in place to implement such a move. So the EU could apply tariffs on whatever they liked with almost complete impunity. Yes, the UK government might put tariffs on a few token EU imports, but nothing that would have a significant impact. But this second stage would be a long way off. The EU would seek to cool things down and get talks back on track before they go down this route. Remember, they've shown this. They've not only shown this specifically with the UK and Brexit. I mean, look what's happening with Hungary and Poland. Their natural response, the natural response of the EU Commission, at any rate, the EU Parliament are a bit more fiery, of the EU Commission is always to calm things down, even if that's not necessarily in their best interest. And they've suggested as such as well. It's not my speculation. And then the third stage is, of course, dissolving the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. That would be the last resort if it was clear that the government were refusing to honour their agreement. I don't think we'd get that far. I think this government will be gone by then. But in theory, we'd be talking about, if it did happen, we'd be talking a very long time before this stage. So for Johnson, you could argue strategically there's no real harm in him pushing this bill, because the consequences from the EU will not be immediate. And he's all about doing things for which there are no immediate consequences. He could even potentially allow his ministers to use the power it grants, because it will still take a long time before the consequences hit that he will think he can pull back at a later date once his authority has been re-established. Because remember, back in 2020, the pandemic was raging, the Brexit talks were going badly, and Johnson's position was under threat. Now, at that time, what did he do? There were people talking about getting rid of him then. This was towards the end, like autumn 2020. What did he do? He got associates to let it be known that he was planning on resigning the following spring because he couldn't afford a nanny on a prime ministerial salary. Do you remember that? Did he? Did he resign the next spring? Did he? Bollocks. He just said it to get the rebels off his back. He just says these things. It's like saying, you know, he kicks the can down, always kicks the can down. By the next spring, he had a positive poll rating again. His authority was re-established, so he just dropped the whole thing. We've been here before. Johnson is just doing whatever is necessary to get himself through that day or that week. You know, he kicks the can down the road in the belief that something will happen to reverse his fortunes once more. Once he has his poll rating back, he will intend not to actually use the powers in this bill. That's what I think is in his head. He's just thinking to himself, do this, get the ERG off my back. It'll take a while for this bill to go through Parliament anyway. And even when it's gone through, it'll take a while before the EU really do anything serious about it. And he'll just think, in that time, I'll have got my poll rating back. He won't, but he'll think that. And then he'll just ignore it. But I hear you asking, what happens when his poll rating doesn't bounce back? Well, by then we may hope that Johnson is gone anyway. You know, this Northern Ireland Protocol bill is unlikely to pass through Parliament all that quickly. You know, as long as it's not passed before autumn, we have the Privileges Committee result and a few other obstacles in Johnson's way. We'll then need to see whether either a badly limping Johnson or his replacement will do, you know, finish the bill towards its end. We can also imagine, actually, that the House of Lords would block it as being against the law. I mean, I'll talk more about that in another video. But Johnson isn't pursuing this bill because he wants it. It's because he needs it for political survival in the short term. This is presumably why rebels are targeting it. But it remains to be seen just how many rebels will abstain when their non-compliance will be very public. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.